for this. It's all over.
Yeah.
And we have witnessed history. Going forward with that responsibility is Mike Brosnan.
This is it now.
Mike
Here
Brosnan
he comes.
taking the kick, a very quick one. And he does it. Does it. He has won it for New York. They have won the penalty shootout. They have won it and won this game, the first ever game in the championship for New York.
Yeah.
There's an invasion of the pitch right now. We have witnessed history.
So that's Ocean FM. It is more the Leitrim perspective than the New York perspective. So maybe not quite the euphoria that was being reflected on the pitch, but interesting to hear it nonetheless. So that was Ocean FM. I presume, Shane Carthy, you were a touch more excited. You're very welcome.
Hey, how's it going? We were, everyone was in tears nearly at the end. It was just one of those epic battles that just neither team wanted to win or lose the game. It just went on and on. But look, we're happy to be on the right side of it anyway.
So New York know the deal here. You're meant to welcome the opposition over, show them a good time, take your beating, and we'll see you next year. Thanks for playing. So when did you get a sense, be it 20 minutes into the match or 2 months ago or somewhere in between, that this might be a bit different, Shane?
I got a sense when I first spoke to the manager, Johnny McGeaney, when he first called me back in January, that, they kept 24 of the squad from last year, that there was obviously a massive buy-in. And then when I first flew down the end of January for first kind of training weekend, Johnny Glynn picked me up. He's the captain of the team. And I just got a real sense of like something is building here. And he was so passionate about it. And he's a massive warrior on and off the pitch. Just a really, really good guy. And I wanted to do everything I can to help the team. And it was more about how could I add to that of this really strong bond that they already have.
I presume very unusual to keep 24 of the previous year's squad. It's synonymous, London and New York, with lots of turnover. Yeah,
like typically in the past, like my first time playing in New York was when I was 17. I made my debut against Mayo. And to compare, like, look, there's a lot of mileage on the clock since then for me personally. But when I went back, it felt like it was a completely different setup altogether. Like New York teams in the past, there would have been one or two very good players and then lads just kind of thrown in, and they didn't really have a togetherness. Whereas the big thing I noticed was the massive togetherness that the squad already had. And it felt like an inter-county team that would be back home,
So you're based in Boston. What's the commute like to New York, and how often did you make it over the course of the year?
Yeah, so I'm in Boston here the last 2 years. I play with Donegal Boston, my club, and the big thing for me was that I wanted to stay. Look, I'm living and working here. I really enjoy the city, enjoy what I do. So my thing was I didn't want to have to transfer back, like to play club football in New York. And because New York was my first home county, it's who I represented, and I came up through the minor board ranks with the Rangers club in New York. So up until I was 18, 19. So for me, I always knew I wanted to finish my kind of intercounty career with New York. And when I spoke with Johnny, we just kind of mapped out what it would look like. So we planned it was 10 trips in total, starting the end of January. And the last trip would then obviously be the game. So I'd leave the office at like 1:30 in the afternoon. And then I'd take an Uber to the airport, Logan Airport, hop on a quick flight down to Westchester Airport, a small little airport north of the city. And I'd jump in another taxi then down the road to Yonkers, where my father has a house, and I'd kind of have a small bite to eat and then head down to Gaelic Park to go train around 7 o'clock. I'd work remotely Friday, and then train Saturday and Sunday and back up the road on the flight again. So it actually worked out quite well once you got into the routine,
Yeah. So you mentioned there you made your debut for New York in 2009 against Mayo. You grew up in New York. Were you born to Irish parents in New York, or New Yorkers and with strong family links? Because obviously people know you were back and played for Dublin for a number of years as well, and won 2 All-Irelands with Dublin and a Club All-Ireland as well. So what's your background, Shane?
Yeah, no, like both my parents are from Raheny in Dublin, so there was always strong ties to Dublin, and particularly then to Vincent's when I did go back. But No, they both moved over when I was like 3 or 4. It was
Right.
around the '94 World Cup, and my dad was he's a very hard worker. He's a carpenter and loved it in New York. So he was like, look, I'm staying here. And in fairness, my mother was more of a home bird. She always wanted to go home. So it just worked that my mother moved home and my dad stayed here. And then I just kind of grew up in schools in America. And then when I was 18, I always knew I wanted to go back and try and play for the Doves and get into the Vincent's team. So that was kind of a dream that I kind of helped get into reality. And went to DCU. Was lucky to play some really good DCU teams, and it just went full circle.
Wow.
Then.
So the primary reason you left New York and came back to Dublin was to play for Dublin?
Correct, yeah. That would have been the goal when I was 17, 18, yeah.
Wow. And how many people said to you, I mean, best of luck, buddy?
Pretty much everyone, to be honest with you. It had never been done before. So my whole thing was, just because it hasn't been done before, it doesn't mean that it can't be done now. So I was very strong-willed, and I was very lucky to get some excellent coaching in Vincent's. And that really gave me the platform to put a map in place of how I could actually do it.
Yeah.
In terms of like goal setting, and every week trying to work on things of how I can get better, and seeking that feedback of always trying to get better. And then when I got into the Dublin setup, I was just in awe of how professional everything was, and I just tried to soak it in as much as possible and learn as much as possible. And now it's kind of gone the opposite way. Now I'm one of the older guys on the New York team, and I'm speaking to some of the younger guys saying, like, look, you're as good as anyone that's back home. You know, I've played with all the lads like James McCarthy, Jack McCaffrey, or any of these guys. Like, I'm trying to tell these younger guys that, like, just because you haven't grown up with the game doesn't mean that you can't be as good.
That's so interesting. I had no idea those years on the panel that was your story. And when you arrived back in Dublin at 17, 18, were you behind the curve? Were you off the pace?
Like, the big thing that New York that we don't have, right, is that it's not played year round, and they're not getting games year round. And the standard probably isn't as high. So probably a little bit off the pace. Yeah, I had a bit of work to do, but like, I was willing and eager to put that work in. And that's probably the most important thing. I was so hungry for it that I just found a way to always be asking for feedback and looking to figure out a way to make things work. Like, I knew I wasn't going to be as skillful as the likes of Dermot Connolly or, Mossy Quinn and Vincent's, but I knew I could ask them, well, how can I get better? And trying to control the things that were controllable, such as the fitness. I was like, well, I can probably go after become the fittest player on the team, and strength wise. So all those things I tried to really go after, and then try and work on the weaknesses, just say, of my left foot, which you could probably see on Saturday came to fruition there at the end. Thankfully.
It sure did. Your fitness has been talked about by any of your teammates I've seen over the last couple of days. Paddy Andrews here on the football podcast. Paul Flynn, I saw, referenced it on the link up you did on the Sunday game highlight show. They both said you were the fittest player in the Dublin camp. And that is a Dublin camp with a couple of greyhounds who could, I would think, run all day. So, of course, hard work. Have you done any tests? Is your VO2 max capacity off the charts? Are you naturally inclined to be fit, or was this just ferocious work?
I'm not really too sure, to be honest. I'd say it's probably some sort of genetic. I mean, my father was a big weightlifter. He weightlifted for Ireland for a couple of years, and he was big into the gym. So I always, as a kid, was always in the gym watching him. And then I naturally would just find out, like, if there was a fitness test tonight and I turned up, I just felt like I could just run for whatever reason. But yeah, I mean, look, I was fortunate to be part of some of those, like that Dublin team. Like you said, there was a lot of greyhounds in there, and that just made, I think my part was to try and drive the lads on in terms of in training, just being a dog and never making it easy and trying to fight for a jersey. So I was very lucky to be part of that as well.
Who was generally the man in your jersey there, or the jersey that you wanted?
Paul Flynn or Dermot Connolly, so I was up against it a little bit.
Okay, so it's kind of hard to knock on Jim Gavin's door and say, here, what's the story?
Say again?
It's kind of hard to knock on Jim Gavin's door and say, what's the story? Why am I not in ahead of those two guys?
I did a few times, and he just kind of was like, "Look, you're doing everything right, but like it's a difficult one to try and move either two of them. Like like both of them as a kid growing up were always idols, So to try and even be around them was great.
So what was the motivation? I mean, look, I get being part of that high performance environment must be an amazing thing, and of course you're winning All Irelands and you're getting some game time, but I guess you're one of those interesting cases who has uprooted his entire life, is training ferociously and giving up a huge amount of his time in the knowledge that he's probably not going to play 70 minutes all that often, and yet you keep doing it.
Yeah, I mean, the motivation for me was I wanted to prove to myself and to everyone else that like anything is possible, whether it was playing for Dublin. Like I remember when I was about 15, 16, I wrote down a couple of goals that I wanted to do, and three. Like I'll give you the three of them. Was number one was to win an All Ireland with Dublin. Number two was to win an All Ireland with Vincent's, and then number three was to win a championship game with New York. And I thought it might have gone the three the other way. I might have won the game with New York first, but as it turned out, it was nearly the latter. But yeah, I mean, it just really does go to show, like, if you do set your mind to something and you put everything you can in place to go after it, then you can actually achieve it.
When did you go back to New York?
So I didn't. I was working in Bank of Ireland for 4 years and was very content living in Ireland and playing with Vincent's. Like, the club for me was a massive part of it. It helped shape who I am today. Like everyone in there was just a massive part of my life. And I went to Boston in 2018. Myself and Dermot Connolly went for a summer, and we went to Donegal, Boston, and I just fell in love with the place, the people, like everyone in the club, and was brilliant. We won the championship that year. We had an excellent team. Dermot probably put on one of the ultimate performances. He kicked 12 points in the county final that year, but I knew I wanted to go back to following somewhere. So in 2019, then I went again and was part of another successful team. We won the championship that year. And then 2020 was COVID, and it was kind of at a bit of a crossroads in terms of, like, look, my football career was coming towards the twilight, and I knew I wanted to kind of find what's next for me, work-wise and career-wise. So I was my father lives in New York, so I was over during COVID visiting him, and I ended up coming up to Boston for a weekend and met a couple of the guys off the Donegal Boston team, and they were like, look, you have an American passport, would you not think of staying here? I said, well, look, if the right opportunity came, I wouldn't rule it out. And they connected me with a guy, Fergal Woods, who runs the company I work with now. Went in and met him, and we just clicked straight away, and he offered me a job. I was like, when can you start? So I had to ring my man and say, look, I'm actually moving to Boston here out of nowhere. And she's like, what?
Oh, dear.
So,
your parents must be like, our son, we love him, he's a strange kid.
They don't know if I'm coming or going, but if I set my head to something, I'm all in,
Yeah. I mean, and like, it just shows that the GAA network, like, there's that old line that if you walk into a GAA club, any GAA club, any part of the world with a problem, someone in that club's going to be able to help you with your problem, be it employment or needing help in some way. So it goes to show. Did I see you say that? So you kicked, I mean, with your left foot, you kicked 5 points on Saturday, including the equaliser deep into added time. Am I right in saying you couldn't kick the ball with your right foot because your quad was in such a bad way?
It was definitely sore, all right. I was kicking threes the week before, and I was nearly kicking them too well with my right, and I felt something that just wasn't right. I was kicking a longer range one, and I knew straight away there was something, bit of damage there. I went into the physio and I put a bit of a rub on it, and I just said, look, at this stage, we're better just leaving it alone. And I mentally just prepared all week that, look, I'm going to try and do as much as I can with my left foot as possible.
Right. Not ideal.
Not ideal preparation, but you know what? Like, we had a few lads carrying knocks. I know Johnny had a bit of a knock going in, and so did Adrian Barty. But like, we were laughing and joking at the physio a couple of days before, like saying, if we get through the first half, the three of us would be delighted. myself and Vardy, again, we really got on very well. Like, we were joking saying we never even trained together fully, the two of us. Like, so before the game, I actually said, here, Vardy, you might have a word here about like how we're going to set up and try and get some scores here, because we didn't know what way we were going to get them,
Yeah, it's a different world. So, I mean, like, amazing scenes. I presume it was a great weekend. And now you have the 22nd of April looming, and Markovich Park and Sligo. And, I mean, talk about a carrot of making a Connacht final. Is everybody, you included, going to be able to even travel? I presume when you're mapping out the year as positive as you're all being, maybe you hadn't fully anticipated 22nd of April.
Yeah, I mean, like, look, it was always the goal is to get there. So we're lucky that 98% of the squad can travel. There's maybe one or two that are waiting for visas that are on the extended panel. So, look, everyone that was in our 26 should be available to go. So, we're looking forward to it very much. So, like you said, the dust is kind of settled now. So, trying to get the bodies right and bit of recovery in, and look forward to the trip back to Dublin next week.
Okay, well, listen. You're coming back next week?
Say again?
You're coming back next week, did you say?
Well, that's when, next
it's 22nd. Yeah. Sorry, geez, the days are flying by. Of course, yeah. Oh, that is quick turnaround. Very quick turnaround.
Saturday week, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
how will your quad be? I mean, I'll be honest. If I was marking you, I'd probably stay on your left foot at the moment until we see how it goes.
Well, look, I think I'd say I'll be grand. Like, look, our whole ethos, like, where it's just kind of playing off the cuff, and we didn't really focus too much on Leitrim the same way we'll try not to focus too much on Sligo. It's just kind of put the head down and give it everything we can, and that's kind of the way the team has gone. We've nearly gone back a couple of years in terms of, I felt sometimes the intercounty game can get a bit too professional and a bit too serious, where with our squad it's not really like that. We're not focusing too much on tactics or talking too much. It's nearly like probably the dressing room that's behind you in that picture there, the 70s or 80s of lads just putting the head down and tearing into it.
It probably makes a lot of sense to lean into that atmosphere, and like, for all of the and to be fair, you would have seen it with Dublin, the extraordinary levels of progress in terms of preparation and tactics and planning. I don't know, I look at a lot of teams around the country and I just think it's turned them almost a touch stale, and there's a lack of adventure and just a lack of panache, especially when they have the ball. Maybe we overcook ourselves at times.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I think the structure that if you put in place, you have to go back to when you're a kid and you just want to play. And for me, looking back on that game, I felt like all of us were just expressing ourselves, and maybe the Leitrim team were a bit structured and within themselves, whereas they just didn't. If you just focus on going out and play like you're a kid and have the enjoyment and that fun element to it, I think that's what the game's all about. That's why we play, is to literally have fun. Like, if you look at that New York squad, every single person there is from a different place or has a different background, so we were kind of feeding off that, is that everyone is bringing something different to the team, and let's just kind of have a go and enjoy it.
Yes.
And that's really what it was all about. I was trying to create that bond of, like, we're all in the States, we're all from different areas. Like, I'm up in Boston, but we're trying to create that bond of, like, look, we're getting together to play football, and isn't it great that we're getting to play an intercounty team in Gaelic Park in a packed house on our turf? Like, let's just go at it. Let's seize the moment, kind of thing. And we did that. It was fun. It really was fun.
Jeez, I think you're making everybody want to play for New York. I mean, that is how it should be, I think. What an amazing story. I hadn't realised that was your weird and wonderful route to where you are in your career thus far. So thank you so much for taking the time. Really appreciate it. And I dare say the neutral will be wishing you guys well against Sligo. Shane Carthy of New York, thank you very much.
Yeah, hopefully see you out in Sligo next week.
Yes, absolutely. Shane Carthy with us live on the line from New York. Amazing insight into how all that's come about there. Our Gaelic football coverage and Off the Ball is in partnership with AIB, proud sponsors of the All-Ireland Senior Football Championship. Check out #TheToughest for more. And should mention as well, the football pod are hitting the road. They're going to go to Killarney. James O'Donoghue, Paddy Andrews, Tommy Rooney. They'll be at the Southern Hotel for a live episode. Special guest as well on Thursday, May the 4th. So offtheball.com/events is where you can get your tickets, all in partnership with AIB.